Well, the shot you see, of course, is the Olympic Stadium, but you may have caught a glimpse in the top left of the picture of the Marmi Stadium, built by Mussolini, ringed by 60 strapping marble figures. There it is, and the girls will run past that. The first half of the route passes St. Peter's Square, of course, so they should be inspired by that. It crosses the River Tiber, passes the Piazza di Popolo, the Piazza di Spagna, the Spanish Steps, Capitolini Hill, the Roman Forum, the Colosseum twice. So you can see it is a competition for the London Marathon. It's a magnificent historic course.
If you get a little confused, actually they come back to the same point through a loop in the middle of the course no less than 3 times. That's the famous wedding cake, so-called. It's not enjoyed, that name, by Romans. It's an American phrase, but they come past the wedding cake no less than 3 times. Highly recognizable, that famous white marble building. The tomb of the unknown warrior. The eternal flame burns for 24 hours every day, guarded by soldiers. So, the second World Championship Ladies Marathon underway, and they've started very gently, and I'm not surprised. 26 miles, 385 yards, 2 laps of the track, and the leader at the moment is the favourite, the Commonwealth champion Lisa Martin of Australia. Won the Commonwealth title in Edinburgh last year, and followed by Veronique Marot, the former British record holder. Rosa Mota and one of the other favourites moving up, so we've got 3 of the big names in the marathon all together at the same time, right in these early stages. You may hear the clatter of helicopters overhead. That's the signal being bounced by the television service, RAI, up to the helicopter and then back to the ground stations. Rosa Mota of Portugal. Lisa Martin. Both together up front. And if one had to look for the best 2 marathon runners in this, the most favoured, you would be looking at these 2.
I think we will be looking at them for quite a while today, but I think we'll be looking at them going a little bit faster than they're doing right now. Interestingly enough, this is only the 5th ever championship marathon. There was the Olympic Games, which Joan Benoit won in '84. There was the World Championships the last time around, which Greta Waits won in '81 and '83, and then 2 European Championships, both won by Rosa Mota. So of the 4 titles that have already been won in the marathon, Rosa Mota has won 2 of them.
Well, they'll be looking for some shade fairly soon as they leave the stadium. They'll get that, but they'll also get cobblestones for a large part of the outward journey, although the inward journey, or the latter part of the race, is said to be a little more comfortable. What downhill there is comes in the second part of the race. Of the 7 hills that surround Rome, 3 of them, or 4 of them are included really, but only in part. But there are pastoral patches along the Via Nomentana and through the Villa Borghese, so they'll get some shade there, and it's still in the high 80s, and so they'll be looking for that.
I think as they're going around already, they'll be reflecting on the fact that the last 3 days in Rome, the temperature has been reasonably cool, in the high 60s, low 70s at this stage in the evening. And suddenly on marathon day, well, we've hit blazing sun. Angela Payne going through on the outside, just in the edge of the shot. Also, like Veronique Marot, a member of the Leeds City Athletic Club. Rosa Mota taking it very steadily. They're approaching 800-metre mark now, 2 laps from where they started, and they leave the stadium now, and the time at about 2 laps, 800 metres, 2:54. Very, very, well, modest indeed, but one must say as well, sensible. What a marvellous sight this is. This is one of the great Olympic arenas in the world. The scene of the 1960 Olympic Games, the first ever Olympic Games to be televised worldwide. Rosa Mota, best out of her shorts. Alongside her is Lisa Martin. Marot right on the outside, and a couple of Russians up there as well. Paula Fudge in the leading group.
We're going to see some tremendous difference between the leaders here and the followers, because Rosa Mota and Lisa Martin have personal bests 226, around about 225, 226, and yet some of the Africans, some of the underdeveloped countries, I'm pleased to see that they've entered women for this race, but some of them have times which are half an hour to an hour behind these girls. So when we get out into the streets of Rome, where the course starts looping in and out and passing the Piazza di Venezia 3 times initially, and then another 3 times on the second loop, I think we'll be seeing girls going both ways down the road, which may be a little confusing, but I don't think it'll be confusing to these girls. Lisa Martin watching Rosa Mota, she thinks her competition today is going to come from Rosa Mota, and then when I asked her who else she was worried about, she said those 3 Russians. She doesn't know very much about them. They don't run internationally in New York and Boston and in London like they do, but they are certainly top-class marathon runners. Ivanova, the Russian who won the World Cup this year, is one that they don't know anything about other than she won the World Cup, and that's something which, when you go into a race, it's not good that you don't know more about your competitors than that. And I know that Lisa Martin, all she knows is she's got to worry about the Russians.
Nice to see Veronique Marot up there, wearing 266. Born in Compiègne in France, but is a member of the Leeds City Club, same as Mick Hill. Has lived in Britain since 1976 and was granted British nationality in 1983. She's a graduate of York University and coached by Brian Scobie. Brian Scobie has a lot to do with this race because he also coaches Angela Payne from Bromley, but she's a Leeds City club member. And Paula Fudge from Isleworth, Paula Yeoman that was, is a member of the Hounslow Club, and she's coached by Conrad Milton. And these girls, to our surprise, and I think Brendan's particularly, were warming up for this marathon. Even though it was late in starting, it was steaming in the sun, and they were jogging up and down, and that came as a big surprise.
To the girls out on the road on that long journey. Rosa Mota still up there. Also there, Lisa Martin. Paula Fudge isn't far away.
Veronique Marot from Britain in that leading group too, and Kathy Toomey, the only American up there, but all 3 Russians. So Lisa Martin was right to be worried about all 3 Russians, because this group is beginning to edge away the Finnish girl in that group as well. So we've got about 7 of them, and they're traveling comfortably for the first kilometer, but they then started running for real, and they're running about 227, 228 pace, which is what you would expect from these 2 world-class girls, Lisa Martin and Rosa Mota.
Kathy Toomey of America up there as well, just on the outside. 266 is Veronique Marot. And Veronique's been injured, in fact, and not the best of times in the last couple of seasons. I want to hope she's back to her best, because she really could test them. Just past 3,000 meters now in the marathon, and Rosa Mota is still the leader. And Rosa Mota seems to me to be taking this on. Lisa Martin's content to sit in behind just at the moment, but the Portuguese girl quite happy just to dictate the pace. She's going at the pace that she wants.
You've got to admire her. I mean, she led right from the beginning. She's one of the 2 favorites for the race, and she decided to go out of the stadium to run at her own pace. And I mean, if she hadn't kept it going, they were almost walking for the first couple of 100 meters. And there's Veronique Marot. She already looks to me as though she's suffering from the heat. Her face is a bit red, and she's probably in England hasn't had much chance to acclimatize herself. So this is going to be a test. There you can see the cobbled roads that we've talked about, and they've just gone past 4 kilometers, and their pace is reasonably quick, but I'm full of admiration for Rosa Mota here. This looks sensible running. She's not going crazy, and she's not worried about anyone else. She's just settling down and looking really good. Well, they've just come through St. Peter's Square, through the Vatican City, and Rosa Mota really started motoring then. She's immediately accelerated beyond 4 kilometers, and at 5 kilometers started to open a gap. And Lisa Martin in 2nd place and the Russian girl in 3rd place. But Rosa Mota means business. She's taken off very, very early, 5 kilometers, and she's running about 2:25 pace, which is excellent pace in any weather. And Veronique Marot has dropped back into about 6th place, but I feel that she's beginning to suffer from the heat, so she's got a long day ahead of her. I just hope she can get herself cooled down.
And Rosa Mota is still the leader, and she's cut it out right from the start. Very easy first 2 laps, but she got herself at the front of the field right from the start, and she's gone away since then. Followed by one of the Soviet athletes, Khramenkova, who is the Soviet champion, and Lisa Martin of Australia, the Commonwealth champion.
And I've been looking back through the field, and I think Veronique Marot is in 8th place and running strongly now. It seems to be cooler there. They're in the shade, and the temperature's falling slightly. It's still very difficult conditions, and the pace being set by Rosa Mota there in the lead is phenomenal. She's running about 2:26, 2:27 pace, and in 2nd place the Russian Khramenkova and Lisa Martin are racing it out. Khramenkova there leading just ahead of Lisa Martin. There's going to be a terrific race for the medals here, but I don't think the race for first is over yet, because I'm just wondering about how fast Rosa Mota is going. And I've noticed Lisa Martin looking at her watch all the way. Rosa Mota looks strong, and the heat shouldn't really affect her too much, training as she does in Portugal and being one of the top marathon runners in the world. In the absence of Ingrid Christiansen and Greta Waitz and Joan Benoit, who's away having a baby, Rosa Mota probably can claim to be the #1 marathon runner in the world. And Rosa Mota still leading in the marathon now. I've just worked it out. I think she's leading by about 1.5 minutes from Lisa Martin, who's now just, all her fears have been confirmed because she's been surrounded by the 3 Russian girls that she was worried about beforehand. 3 Russians, Ivanova, Khramenkova and Tsukhlo. So Lisa Martin, 1.5 minutes down on Rosa Mota as they pass through the older part of Rome, the ruins. And none of these athletes will be worried about the sights that they're seeing, especially Rosa Mota, because she's running fantastically well. We've got to watch her in the 2nd part of the race, because I'd be very surprised if she can keep this pace going, but she may not need to keep the pace going, David.
No, she's certainly taken a very positive attitude, and actually the time gap, I've just had to check on this, is about, 1 minute and 25 seconds, which is astonishing.
Well, we going behind Rosa Mota, there's a group of 4, and there's Lisa Martin in the middle of that group, has now been joined by the 3 Russian girls. This is what she was talking about before the race. She was 16 kilometers, and they're 1.5 minutes behind Rosa Mota, and Lisa Martin said that the 3 Russians would be her problem. She didn't know anything about them except the World Cup victory and the Russian champion, but she'll have to find out now.
Just passing one of Rome's most famous landmarks there. The monument to Victor Emmanuel and the tomb of the unknown soldier. They passed that no less than 3 times, actually, on a loop system with this. But I must warn you, I saw on a separate monitor then some separate coverage, which gave 1 minute 25 seconds as the gap, which I still find very surprising indeed. If she's got that far ahead, well, she may pay for it in the closing stages in this heat, but she is used to running and training in heat.
Rosa Mota has just gone through halfway in the marathon in 1 hour, 12 minutes and 10 seconds, which if she keeps that going would bring her home around 2:23, 2:24, which is fantastic running in these conditions. Both the course and the conditions, and the fact it's a championship performance. And she's looking really strong. She hasn't done anything wrong at all. She's led all the way. She knew what time she was aiming for, I feel. And she's in the Piazza Navona right now, which is one of the most picturesque piazzas in Rome.
Well, classic areas, in fact. If you saw this in the aerial shot, you'd see it's built like an old track, rather like the old Greek stadium in Athens where the Olympics were held in 1896. Indeed, it is said that the ancient Romans ran here, well, years and years and years ago. It's just a little loop off the track. There, the fountain of the 4 rivers. Well, the ladies must be getting fed up with the sight of that. One of the famous tourist sites in Rome, the Wedding Cake, the monument to Victor Emmanuel, and also the tomb of the unknown soldier. And there's Rosa Mota going past it yet again. And she's way in front. In fact, Brendan Foster's been keeping track on a separate monitor of what's been going on out there. And what's the lead look like?
Well, I think Rosa Mota is about 2.5 minutes in the lead from Ivanova, the Russian, Lisa Martin in 3rd place, and then Tsukhlo, the other Russian, and Khramenkova, another Russian. So the Russians have got 3 in the first 5, but Rosa Mota is showing them the way home here. This is a tremendous piece of running. She hasn't shown any signs of suffering from the conditions, from the course, from the fact that she's been coming into this race as one of the favourites, and the fact she had an injury a couple of weeks ago, and it was a little scare about her coming into today's race, but she's answered all of her critics on that one, because she's in tremendous form here. They've had great crowds on the course today, and the organisation has been excellent, but there's Rosa Mota leading comfortably in the marathon.
Well, the crowd now concentrating on the finish of the marathon. That, by the way, is not the leader. Ivanova, who we think may well still be in second place, but the leader is a long, long way in front. It's Rosa Mota of Portugal, the reigning European champion, in fact, double European champion. And she's led, well, since the moment they started on the track. They ran 2 laps inside the Olympic arena before they left along the hot and sticky roads. She was leading out of the stadium, increased the lead almost immediately, and just in fact, Brendan, has been running away.
She's been going away all the time since she stepped on it, but if you look at her kilometre times, she ran 16 minutes and 50 seconds for the second 5 kilometre, sorry, and that was what put her away from the rest of the field, and then it was a race against herself. And I've got to say that I remember a similar situation when she was winning the European Championship in Athens, where she was leading for the last 10 miles or so, and she was surrounded by cars, but in Athens they had bikes and they had people running on the track and running alongside her, and I'm impressed so far with the organisation of this marathon. It's taken in all the scenic routes, but it's also given the runners something to go for. They've been wonderful crowds, and look at that. Franco Fava, who's the course director and the race director for this marathon, says this is a marathon through 2,000 years of civilization. That's his major selling point.
And that's a lovely illustration, isn't it? A lot of comment about the marathon course, too many turns, too much of a scenic route and tourist route, not a fast course, but little Rosa Mota is making nonsense of that.
Well, she's ignored what they told her about the course, because she set off with a vengeance. She was running about 2:23, 2:24 pace. But I do notice in the last few miles, at every opportunity, she's either been drinking or sponging her head. So she's obviously suffering a little from the temperature, even though she spends a lot of her time training in Portugal in the very, very warm weather down there in the Algarve. She lives in Oporto, up in the north of Portugal, but at every opportunity she gets down at the Algarve to train. Same kind of training that Carlos Lopez used to do. She's this year won the Boston Marathon and won that unchallenged. And really, you know, she's had nobody arguing with her this year at all.
The Vatican City, which formed part of the outward course, and also they came around the rim of the Vatican City, entered the Vatican City and came around the other side on the return journey.
St. Peter's there, where you can pop St. Paul's in about 3 times over, where 750,000 people gather when the Pope is present in Rome. Those cobblestones, incidentally, when there were criticisms of them, it was pointed out that some of them have been down 2,000 years and maybe a bit smoother than other cobblestones that athletes have had to run on.
I don't think there's any doubt about the truth of that, actually, but there's also no doubt, Brendan, about the truth. It's not very even, it's not very comfortable running, and this is a magnificent run.
It's not a comfortable surface to run on, but Rosa is very light, so she's obviously hitting the ground with a lot less force than the men will be. But don't you think this marathon has the same sort of feel as the London Marathon? It's through all the best parts of the great parts of Rome. There we are in St. Peter's Square. And I just have a feeling that it's going to be, as a result of this World Championship marathon, the Rome Marathon, this is the course for the Rome Marathon, is going to be enhanced greatly. I don't think anyone will ever run as fast as she does on that course, though.
I was just wondering, actually, smiling at the reaction of some of our outside broadcast camera boys. I think the camera on the wobble there was feeling the cobbles.
Well, that square, the masterpiece of Bernini, constructed in 1656 to 1667. It really is quite superb. This is where St. Peter is buried, and that on the centre balcony of St. Peter's is where the Pope gives his benediction. a certain spot where you can stand in the middle of St. Peter's and where all those columns blend as one.
Through 38 kilometres, and Brendan will have a check on the pace there. Just past it now, and he's got the running watch.
Well, she is slowing a little, but the rest of the field seem to be going even further behind, so she's maybe just slacking off the pace so that she can concentrate on winning this. She's got about 2.5 to 3 minutes lead over the rest of the field, and that's phenomenal because, you know, we did have Lisa Martin, the Commonwealth champion in the race, or we do have Lisa Martin in the race. We have got the World Cup winner, Ivanova from Russia, in the race. And, you know, apart from Ingrid Christensen, who's been injured recently, and Greta Waitz, who was injured and had to pull out of this race, Joan Benoit, who's having a baby right now, there isn't anyone else available. So she's beating everyone who's available to compete.
Just dropping back to the second girl, we believe it's Ivanova of the Soviet Union. She's now 35, winner of the World Cup. Best time about just over 2 hours 30. But she's been up there in the battle for second place, but by herself, so far as we can tell, for quite a long time now in second place. Incidentally, if you're getting a bit irritated because we can't tell you the positions of the British girls, that Veronique Morrow, Paula Fudge and Angela Payne, well, we, like you, are following the race on monitors, and we're getting no information back at all. But the last we saw, just before halfway, or perhaps even before the 10-mile mark, Veronique Morrow was back in about 7th place. At that stage, we couldn't trace the other British girls. And at the moment, as well, we're not absolutely sure who's in 3rd place because there's no information being fed back onto the giant scoreboard in the stadium, apart from the first 2 positions. Rosa Mota, as Brendan says, is quite small. She's only about 5'3", 5'4". She's 29, but she's got a lot of mileage behind her. She's been running marathons for quite a long time. She's got a best time of 2 hours 23 and a few bits. And I was just looking back on the all-time list, 2 hours 23:29. That is the 3rd fastest time by any athlete. Christensen, of course, is the fastest time, set on the London course at 2:21:06. That's obviously not going to be threatened unless something startling happens. Benoit, Joan Benoit, the Olympic champion, is the 2nd fastest time. Incidentally, just to give you some idea of the gap, Ivanova, on another monitor I'm watching, has just gone past the 37-kilometre mark, or kilometre mark. So she is at least the 2 minutes behind that Brendan's talking about.
Brendan was rightly making the point earlier that in the women's event, most of the world's greats are there, other than those on more important domestic duty. And the point is an interesting one, because in the marathon, where there are major championships on top of one another now, like the World Championships this year and Seoul next year, in some instances, decisions have to be made between them. The women's, I think, is stronger probably than the men's, Brendan. Some of the men have decided that they'll concentrate on Seoul, and 1 or 2 of the Japanese are not here, for example, running in the Fukuoka, which is the Japanese marathon selection for their marathon. But in this women's event, they're all here, and that, again, points to the fact that this is quite a remarkable run.
I really can't see the point of anyone opting out of the World Championships. They're doing it and they're causing themselves a lot of criticism, but I can't really understand why the World Championships isn't big enough. The Olympics is big, the World Championships is getting bigger, and in the long run, I'm sure the World Championships is going to take over.
I've just heard, by the way, that Tsukhlo of the Soviet Union is the girl lying in 3rd place, and the athletes are still, over a mile from the floodlit Olympic Stadium. But when one starts talking about track and field, and to be realistic nowadays, this World Championship has become more important than the Olympic Games. All the countries are here. This is the title to win. There are no dropouts. Only the people who've dropped out are the people who are injured. There's no political boycott. It's the sport running its own sport and without interference.
There's only one thing that's lacking, and that's the history of the Olympic Games, and in time to come it'll have its own history. It is already beginning, even today, even with this run of Rosa Mota. This is a historic run because she's going to crack the World Championship performance of Greta Waitz, and there's nobody better to beat their record than Greta Waitz's record. So I agree with you, David. The World Championships is taking over, and we're beginning to witness it the 2nd time in Rome.
Well, the first World Championships in Helsinki 4 years ago were an enormous success. It's going to be very difficult to follow. But looking around this arena now, well, 60 to 70,000 at least in the Olympic Stadium. And of course, they're not going to go home after the finish of this marathon, because the first of the men's track finals follows. That's the 10,000 meters, which has been brought forward 3 days because there are no heats. And of course, the Italians are hoping to see an Italian victory. She's looking very, very composed, and this is a hard run. I would reckon that she's got to be on schedule for something around 2:24, 2:25.
Well, there's the lovely shot of those facilities. The Marmi Stadium, ringed by 60 statues, one from each province of Italy. That's what Mussolini demanded, and that's what he got. And this stadium improved. Incidentally, it's a football stadium as well. The two Italian clubs play here, and a stadium for 80,000, a magnificent stadium, and the vital warm-up training track right next door. That whole Olympic city with all the facilities drawn together.
See Rosa Mota, one of the comparatively new breed of Portuguese distance runners. Of course, the men have produced some very, very powerful athletes in the last few years. Come from athletic non-entities in many ways to being one of the strongest long-distance nations in the world. And don't forget, of course, Carlos Lopez is the reigning Olympic men's marathon champion.
Actually, that shot there, David, when it's getting dark there now, and she's running through the streets of Rome. I remember when I was a kid watching the 1960 games and watching a Bibi Bikila running through the streets of Rome. Exactly the same situation. I had to refer to that point because that was one of my great motivational forces. I always fancied the marathon, but I never quite made it.
And I was lucky enough to be there that night and commentating when Bikila came through the Roman night along the floodlit Appian Way. The floodlights weren't very good in 1960, and then the event finished alongside the Colosseum through the Constantine Arch.
And I too was lucky enough to be there, looking for some of the 60 kids I brought with school children. I was watching the athletics, but half an eye was on them as they enjoyed the newfound thrills of Rome. Marvellous Olympic Games. Not a great one for British performances, but they were a marvellous Olympic Games. And look what Bibi Bikila has done for the future of the whole of athletics for Ethiopia, and indeed, I think, for the third world generally. Marvellous to see that there is still a stage left for them where they can compete and excel and be world-class athletes. And that's what these World Championships will prove, that there is still a venue, there is still an event. And it's basically running, and it's distance running at that, where from every corner of the earth, we can still find world champions. There were 19 countries in the medals last time. There are now 165 countries in these World Championships. And one hopes that there's going to be a wider and wider spread of those medals. Otherwise, we cannot claim that sport is the true international currency that we'd like to claim that it is.
Inside the last mile. Just left the well-tarmac road, the Viale Angelico, and approaching the stadium. Should be able to see the lights of the stadium, but there are vast grounds surrounding this Olympic arena. Few people can experience the thrill of such a moment, be it the European Championship, the Olympic Championship, or the World Championship. She knows now only a major, major calamity can stop her. And she's looking very, very organised, as she's looked right from the start.
Well, I was going to say, you've got to be impressed with how she looks. She doesn't look to be under any pressure at all. At no point in the race has her confidence flinched for one moment. She laid it down. She knew what kind of time she was going to run, and she's just set off and done it. And she's run 26 miles on her own. She hasn't lost her concentration 1 ounce, and she doesn't look as though she's run that far.
That, remember, we were saying, Brendan, in the heat of the day when they set out 2.5 hours ago, when they were warming up, we were worried about this sun and wondering whether they could take on enough water. Well, she's certainly done it right. There's no question about it. We had doubts in our minds, but there are no doubts. She's run this perfectly in the conditions, shrugged off the effects of the weather, the heat, and the evaporation. She must have taken on a lot of water, and one hopes that that's true of the girls, or the women rather, that are running behind.
Well, critics of the course may have to sit back and wonder just how good this run is, because she's proved, although the course has a lot of turns on, it's a bit uneven with cobbles and so on, it's through city streets, it's pretty warm, she's proved it can be run quickly, although it also shows a measure of the greatness of this run, how far away she is from the rest of the best in the world. Those are the grounds of the Olympic Stadium. It's beautifully lit, actually. It's like daylight in the arena. So now she's well within sight of the stadium entrance. And as always happens with victory in sight, inspiration grows. She's really looking quite bouncy and quite breezy in the last kilometre. The crowd watching on the huge monitors in the stadium know that at any moment the new world champion in the women's marathon will enter the stadium. The lead motorcycle's there, and the stage set for the arrival of the new world champion, Rosa Mota of Portugal. This, a glorious lap of honour. Spectators all around the stadium, rising as she passes them. A journey of 26 miles, 385 yards. This, the second world champion in the women's marathon. 29 years old, Rosa Mota of Portugal, the 1982 and 1986 European champion, becomes the world champion of 1987 and does so in a new championship best time. 2 hours, 25 minutes, 16 seconds, knocks more than 3 minutes of Grete Waitz' winning time of 4 years ago. A superb solo run, and she's not sure whether she's finished. Have I to go on? The answer is no, I think. And she now realises that. She was, well, the concentration there was absolutely brilliant. I think that's why she didn't know Grete.
Well, there was no tape to breast either, and she's used to doing that these days. But, you know, in that run today, there's only Ingrid Christiansen, the world record holder, Joan Benoit, the Olympic champion, and Grete Waitz, the reigning world champion, who've ever run faster than that. And what a performance on a difficult course, under difficult conditions, totally on her own. I was totally impressed with that performance.